hey, look, here's some training in this. Here's a tool you can use. Let me help coach you through using this tool as you lead and work with your team. Because I know that there are so many people out there. There's so many good people who want to change the world, and they've got all the potential in the world, but they just keep running into the same walls over and over again. And they're asking themselves the same question that I asked myself over and over again, which was like, am I the right person for this? Is this job too big for me? Am I in over my head? Are these even the right people? Is this even the right, team? Are these the right seats? Are the right people in the right room, in the right seats? And all these questions and self-doubt and everything else. And I'm telling you, I would not have gotten through that without those relationships, the Davids and the Scotts, and without the right tools that other people had handed me to say, hey, this might help you in your role. And so that's really why I started Communicate to Care. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 23 of the Leading Lounge. This one's going to be a little bit different because I had a friend who said to me, hey, I've been listening to your podcast and you've gone through 22 great episodes interviewing all these other people, but you haven't told me anything about yourself. You hadn't told me who you are. You hadn't told me anything about your own journey. You start every episode with asking people, hey, tell us about your journey that got you to where you are today. And you haven't told me anything about your own journey. And they're right. And so it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about myself. I don't know why. I'm sure there's many reasons, but I said, that's a great idea. Let me do that. And so what I want to do for today's episode is just tell you a little bit about my journey, why I ended up founding Communicate to Care as a nonprofit focused on leadership development, kind of the heart behind it, and just kind of unpack some of that for you guys who are listeners and for people, future podcast guests and other people, my soldiers in the Army Reserve, just a great thing to share. I have a great friend, Elise. I interviewed her earlier on the podcast in a previous episode, but she talks about in a course she does called Hope and Reason, which she mentioned in her podcast, how one of the greatest things you have to share is your story. So don't hold it in, but share it with others because God uses it in many ways and connects you with people through it and that kind of thing. So episode 23 of the Leading Lounge today is just me sharing a little bit of my story and how Communicate to Care came to be and how it is that Communicate to Care ends up addressing some of these common and really big leadership problems that people face. So if I go back, not quite all the way to the beginning, but if I go back to the year 2005, I'm newly married my wife, Elaine, in 2005. And we moved up. We grew up in Middle Georgia in Warner Robins, and we moved up to North Georgia to go to school. I really was just following her. She was a great student, and University of North Georgia, which was then North Georgia College and State University, had a great nursing program. She wanted to be a nurse. She is a nurse. She's a great nurse. And I was just along for the ride. So I said, hey, where you go, I go. I had no ambitions, no goals, really, no desires at the time, other than just, to be with her and let's figure this thing called life out together. So we move up to North Georgia, and this is where the first person comes into my story that really poured into me in a way that was impactful and powerful, and they didn't have to. So we move up there, and the guy that did our premarital counseling, Dave Simonis, who's actually my next interview will be with him. He connected us with a pastor up there that was from the same denomination that we were already in, Calvary Chapel, and said, hey, you got this young couple coming up, connect with them, get to know them, they'll be great for your church. And so his name was David Greer. I also interviewed his son, Joey Greer, in, I think it was season 1 of the podcast. But so we go up to North Georgia. I meet David, and I spend the next 5 years serving under him in ministry. Most of it is just kind of a volunteer. But David got the raw, unfiltered, still at that time, teenage Justin. And so he didn't have to, as far as I can see now, he really didn't stand much to gain other than maybe some entertainment and some headache from bringing on a young fella and kind of saying, hey, let me help you, let me invest in you, let me pour into you. And so I served with him for a while, and it was a very impactful relationship. And it was pretty safe to say the first relationship I'd had outside of my family, where someone kind of took me in and adopted me and said, hey, you got potential. You've got, I think God has a calling on your life. He's got things he wants you to do. And I think what you just need is some help. I think you just need someone to come alongside you and help you. And so I spent 5 years with David investing into me in some really important and really powerful ways. That was the first big part of kind of my leadership story. And just to give you some context, during these 5 years, I'm a newlywed. We had our first kid, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going job to job. I'm not making any money. I'm starting school and I'm dropping out because I don't know what I want to do. And school, why bother with school? It's just a waste of my time when I could be out there doing stuff. So I had just a number of jobs, from working in the construction industry to I was a truck driver. I got a CDL, and I drove a reefer truck up and down the Eastern Seaboard for a little while. I worked as a waiter. I can't even remember all the jobs I had while I was serving in ministry and being kind of trained up by David. But yeah, if I think through it, I worked as an intern at this government office doing GIS, doing like cartography and mapping. Man, what else was there? There was just so many different things. Worked on a horse ranch. I don't remember if I said that. So anyway, just this strange season of life where Justin is this young guy with potential, according to David, but no direction. And so God used this one relationship to really kind of put some foundation under me to help me in the present, but even more in the future. And so moving on from that, I go back. I'm at North Georgia. North Georgia is a military college, so I'm in the Corps Cadets. I'm in ROTC, and at this time, this would have been like 2005 to 2010 was the time frame that I was at North Georgia. So if you know anything about military history at that time, that the surge, that was 2007. And so a lot of the guys that were gals that were my classmates, they were getting plucked out of their Army Reserve or National Guard life, where they went in to get, money for school and that kind of thing. And they're getting shipped over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're coming back. We'd ended up having some casualties. There's some names on a stone wall there at North Georgia for those who, are previous students that were killed in combat during that time. But they come back. And so here's young Justin, early 20s Justin, serving in ministry, getting some, really personal, intentional, relational development from David. But I've also got these fellow students, fellow cadets who are coming back. And I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I don't know what I want to do. And they're telling me, hey, somewhere along the way, I hear about this thing called a chaplain. And it's basically a minister in the military, right? You come in and you have to have credentials as a minister, but you're an officer, you're serving soldiers, you're doing it, you're for God and country, you're building the kingdom, and you're building soldiers and families as well. And I thought, well, man, this is perfect. So I decided, well, this is where I'm going to go. And so I swung my efforts into finishing school, because I had to finish school. And at the time that I kind of sensed this calling to do this, just again, to give you a point of reference for young Justin, I had my GPA at school, because I had started and dropped out so many times, was a 0. That's goose egg, bupkis. That's 0.9, less than a 1. My GPA started with 0. And so I go back to the school and I say, hey, I want to go back. I want to finish. I'm serious this time. It's going to be different, because I think God wants me to be a chaplain. And to do that, I have to finish school, and I want to serve soldiers and all that. And so they say no, as any reasonable person would have. They say, look, your track record is awful. It's terrible. We're not letting you back in here. Go home and find something else to do, but quit playing games with us and wasting our money. And I had, at that point, a terrible GPA, but I also had several $1,000s in debt to the school from ROTC gear and equipment that I had received as a cadet, and I lost it. I don't know where the thing is. library books, checked out library books for a project, lost them. I don't know where the books are. And so I think it was somewhere around three grand, $3,000 worth of money that I owed to the school because of my own irresponsibility and just kind of wandering around and meandering. And, what do I want to do when I grow up? I don't know. And so I go back and I tell my wife, hey, they said no, there's no way I'm getting back in. If this is the route we're going to go, we're going to have to go somewhere else because this is just not working. And she says, write them a letter. Just tell them everything they need to know about you and, that God called you to this and all this. And I'm going, this is a public school. This is not like a Bible college. This public school is not going to care that, God called me to this. Their decision is their decision and it's theirs to make. And, we're going to live with it. But I listened to her, acquiesced, and decided, okay, I'll write this letter and I'll just tell them, I'm different this time. I've grown up, I had somebody investing in me who's helped me kind of find my way. These fellow cadets here, they kind of helped me find my way. I pretty sure I heard from God about this. And if you'll just give me one more chance, I'll make the best of it. And miracle of all miracles, they sent me a letter back and they said, you got one more shot, DuBose. You got one more chance. Your debt's forgiven. You're welcome to come back to school, but you're on probation. So you have to maintain a 3.0 from here on out in order for us not to kick you out. And I said, got it. No problem. I'm in. I'm all in. So I go back to school. And because I'm just so motivated and I'm so gung-ho and I'm kind of an all or nothing guy anyway, I remember I signed up for 8 classes. That's 8 3-hour classes, 24 credit hours. My first semester back after a 0.9 GPA. And I had to get permission to do it because I forget what the max was. I want to say it was like 21 or 22 hours. But they said, hey, you want to try it? You go for it. We already gave you, the ruling. There's probation. Go for it. So I have 8 classes and I'm just busting my hump. I'm still working, multiple jobs. At this time I had that internship job working for this cartography guy, Mark, there at the county office. I'm also driving a school bus. I'm using my CDL from my experience in truck driving. I'm driving a school bus because at this point, we've got our first kid. We just had our first kid. And so I'm driving in the morning. I'm getting up at, my wife's a night shift nurse also, about 30 minutes away from our house. So she's working the night shift. I asked somebody from church, Hannah, if you're listening, thank you. God bless you. This was an incredible blessing in that season of life. But I asked Hannah, hey, I got to leave for the bus before my wife comes home from work. Can you just come and be at the house in case, Lene wakes up or there's some emergency or something? So Hannah says, sure. Such a great help, Hannah. And so I've got to get out of the house before 5 o'clock for my bus route. My wife comes back probably 7:30 or so. She gets off at 7. She's working 7 to 7s. She crashes. I get back from the bus route. I throw my backpack on. I drive. I don't remember exactly how far it was, 30 to 45 minutes away to go to campus to take these classes. So I've got classes booked from 9 to probably 1, nonstop, pretty solid. And then I'm leaving school and I'm driving back home and I'm dropping my backpack and I'm catching a 10-minute power nap and I'm jumping in my school bus and I'm headed to do my afternoon route. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's this little hair here that's sticking up that I'm trying to put down. It's distracted me, and probably you too. But so I come back home and I jump in my bus and I go do my afternoon route. I come back home from my afternoon route. I throw on my backpack again and I drive 30 to 45 minutes for night classes. And then one 3-hour night class, I remember, from, man, I want to say 7 to 10. That sounds really late. It must have been like 5 to 8 or something. But anyway, 3-hour night class. I drive back home and I'm doing my homework and I'm writing my papers and I'm all that. And Elena, my wife, is working at night again, the nights that she's working. So I'm trying to write papers. And that's when I kind of formed this healthy addiction to coffee, and afternoon naps. Anyway, and if Lene happens to wake up, our oldest daughter, if she happens to wake up at night, helping feed her and get her back to sleep and all that. So that was the season of life where I'm taking 8 classes and trying to finish school and doing all these things because I believe, hey, God's called me to this and this is just what I have to do. And there's other people who've said, yeah, you've got the potential. You just need some help. You just need some investment. So I go through this whole thing. I finish school. I graduate. I graduate with my class A's on because it's military school, and I get walked across the stage as Second Lieutenant Justin DuBose. I'm commissioned into the Army Reserves as a chaplain candidate. Oh, it's a great day, right? Well, towards the tail end of that season, I met another guy, another great leader who God just put in my path that just made a remarkable impact in my life, named Scott. So my wife is working at the hospital, as I mentioned to you. She works with a gal who's a former missionary in Africa. And the church that she attends, which was not the church that I was serving at, just gets a new pastor. They just got a new pastor. And guess what? The guy's a retired Army chaplain, freshly retired, and had come to the church by way of being an ethics professor in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, at the General Command and Staff College. So he's career Army chaplain. He gets out of that. He is an ethics professor at the War College, or not the War College, at General Command and Staff College in Kansas. And then, sensing a call to be a pastor, he comes to this church. And so she says, Deb, the lady that she works with, says, hey, Justin should meet our pastor, because I'm sure Elena had told him all about my own personal struggles and my woes of not wanting to know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so, interestingly enough, Scott, this guy that, I just came to love and admire so very much, actually was the one that pursued me. I didn't call him as a normal person would, who, goes, wow, what a great thing. I just kind of assume, what does this guy want to have to do with me? I'm a truck driver, school bus driver, serving in this small church, just trying to finish school. Like, this guy doesn't care about me. He just moved here. He's got this, big church that he's pastoring, and he's got a doctorate degree. It's like, this guy doesn't need me or care about me. Well, the guy called me 2 or 3 times and asked me to have lunch with him. So I acquiesced because, it's like, well, okay, if you want to have lunch that bad, we'll have lunch. And so the first time we met was at this very crummy, very forgettable barbecue joint that was in the town where the church was. And it was just amazing. We just connected, and I'm just going, why does this guy care about me? Why does this guy want to spend time with me? I don't get it. And so my wife and I at the time, so I'm now enrolled in seminary to get my master's degree, my master's of divinity degree, which is a requirement from the Army to be a chaplain. So I'm enrolled in school and working, and we're, thinking about ministry and what does God want us to do and all that. And all of a sudden, this conversation comes out of left field that there's a church in the Atlanta area that's looking for a paid worship pastor. Well, I've been doing this for, 5 years with David, leading worship at his church and that kind of thing. And so, sure, I can do this. And it's a paid gig. Oh, yeah, definitely. So I go down, I interview, I talk to the pastor and the other staff there. And I thought this could be great. And so we were at this crossroads, my wife and I, where at this point we felt like we had 2 options. We knew that God was calling us away from the little church that we had been in and had served in with David that we loved so much, but just knew that God was calling us away. And so our 2 options were basically take this paid gig, which hadn't officially been offered yet at this church in Atlanta, or go up north a little bit and just attend. There's no job tied to it. There's nothing there monetarily or anything concrete, but you take this, just basically attend this church up here with Scott, where perhaps we can get this investment, this intentional relational investment from someone who could really, bless me and help me as we continue to pursue God's call. So my wife and I drive up to the top. There's a mountain in Toccoa, Georgia, Currahee. We drove up to the top of Mount Currahee. We're sitting up there, and we had been talking about it. We've been praying about it. And I remember our arrangement was we're just going to say it at the same time, what we think God wants us to do. Count of three, kind of like rock, paper, scissors, shoot. What is it? And I remember at the time I just knew, I was kind of afraid because I just knew that what Elena wanted was some security and some stability from this paid job over here, because here's Mr. Unstable that she's been married to for the last 5-6 years. And here's a chance finally for a little bit of stability. And so I just know that that's what she wants. But man, I really sense that, God wants me to come over here with Scott, who can pour into my life and who can give me what I need, but there's no money attached to it. So we do the rock, paper, scissors, shoot thing. And 1, 2, 3, go. And another miracle of all miracles, we both said at the same time, go to this other church that's not a paid gig where we're just attending. So basically we just did all this to change churches, and what was really cool about it was just a few days after that whole Mount Curry incident, the church calls me and they don't offer me the role anyway. They don't offer me the job. They offer it to somebody else. And so it was just this wonderful confirmation that, okay, well, God wants us to, invest in this relationship at this church. And so we did. We just basically changed churches is all we did at that point. So we start going there, and I began with this relationship with Scott that becomes such a foundational part of my life. Is he starts inviting me, hey, look, why don't we run the track together every morning? We'll run the track. We'll do the stairs, we'll run the bleachers, we'll run the track. We'll do some push-ups, some sit-ups, some army stuff. But that'll just be the side benefit. The real benefit is I want to pour into you. I want to invest in you. I want to help you, in this journey that you're on. And so I said, man, this is amazing. This is really incredible. And as it happened to be, the guy who had been while we're running the track and I'm getting poured into by just this incredible person, the guy who had been leading their worship for a very long time, I don't remember how long exactly, and he's a great guy, well loved. Everybody loves him. He leaves. He takes another job at a church in Florida. And so in my naivete as a 20-something-year-old guy, I said, hey, I've done this before. I've led worship for 5 years down at this church I was at prior to this. If you just want somebody to fill in, I can do that. And I can just kind of kick the can down the road, until you get somebody better. And so I think out of pure desperation, the church says, that sounds good. Why don't you get up there, young fella, and you do your thing until we'll get somebody else. So I start doing that. And eventually that turns into a full-time thing. But the important thing is, all the while, it's this relationship with Scott that is really the thing that God is using most. He's using the experience. He's using, my opportunity to serve in these different ways. He's given me my education and all that. All those are great. But it's the missing piece all the while in my life had been these relationships. So Dave is the first non-family relationship that comes along and invests in me. And then after that, it gets a little deeper level of investment with Scott, where we're together every day. We're running the track, we're serving together. We're going to conferences together, and he's just giving me absolute gold, and he's pouring into me. And it's not just a professional relationship, but it's, hey, let me help you, and let's spend some time together. And so it became that relationship that was the thing that absolutely changed, my life, the trajectory of my life, even my view of myself and my own capacity for leadership. And I had a college professor, Dr. Alexander. Dr. Alexander, if you ever listen to this, love you, brother. He's now the president recently. Congrats on this, by the way. The president of Texas A&M at Texarkana, newly installed president, Dr. Alexander. So congrats. But Dr. Alexander was the first one when I was at North Georgia who kind of said, hey, you might have the potential for like doctoral work, And I was like, get out of here, man. And then I go work for Scott, and Scott goes, hey, you have the potential for doctoral work. I've got a doctoral degree, and I'm telling you, like, you can do it. And so it wasn't just the professional experience. It was these people speaking into my life and saying, hey, you can do this. We see something there. Let me help you. Let me affirm these things. Let me come alongside and equip you and empower you to do all the things that you're capable of and that God wants you to do. So to fast forward, I was with Scott for about 2.5 years. And then we moved to North Carolina to pastor a church there. And when I was in North Carolina, there was a church and there was a Christian school. And most of it for me was an exceedingly difficult season. A lot of leadership challenges between both the church and the school. One or the other would have been enough, but together was just some really, really severe challenges for me. And it was while I was there that I enrolled in this PhD program for organizational leadership because I thought, I've got the relationships. They firm these things, but oh man, I feel like I'm just missing. Maybe there's some tools or there's some resources or there's just some tribal knowledge or something. But somebody has to have some answers for this because I'm drowning. I couldn't figure out how to get my team to work together. I just couldn't figure out how to get traction. It just felt like we're always putting out fires and you start to get momentum and then something happened that kind of sabotages it. And, I'm like, man, are these the right people? Are these the right people in the right seats? Are these even the right seats? Like, am I the right person? I don't know. I just felt like I just hit walls over and over and over again. And so I enrolled in this PhD program, and the combination of, so I developed this formula for Communicate to Care for leadership development. But it came out of those experiences. And it's basically that the right relationships plus the right tools equal successful leadership development. So leadership development is the right relationships and the right tools, right? So I had the right relationships and I get enrolled in this PhD program and I discover these, these academic theories and all this research behind leadership and communication. And I was like, this is amazing. I wish I would have had this 10 years ago. So I'm finishing up my my dissertation, which is on effective communication from leadership. So communication from leaders to followers. And I come across this theory. It's called the motivating language theory. And I'm reading it and I'm just going, man, this is so practical. This is so useful. If I could capture this would be a wonderful tool that would help people, because all the while I'm meeting with other leaders in the military. I'm meeting with other leaders in the church world. I'm meeting with other leaders in the business world. And a lot of those problems are centered, a lot of their major problems were centered on the same things mine were, which were communication. I don't know how to get you to understand what I'm saying, and I don't know how to get traction. And man, how do we get over this wall? We just keep hitting the same problems over and over and over again. And so that problem and those relationships that I had and those tools that I had been equipped with helped me sit down and kind of build out I built my own leadership model, which I call the 4x4 leadership model. But one of the foundational pieces is a product and service that I call Jumpstart Your Communication. And it's basically taking what I came across and studied and researched and wrote about in my own dissertation, leadership communication, what does effective communication look like, and figured out how to make that something tangible, something concrete, something workable, where you almost have these concrete deliverables along the way. And you go, hey, look, here's some training in this. Here's a tool you can use. Let me help you. Let me help coach you through using this tool as you lead and work with your team. Because I know that there are so many people out there. There's so many good people who want to change the world, and they've got all the potential in the world, but they just keep running into the same walls over and over again. And they're asking themselves the same question that I asked myself over and over again, which was like, am I the right person for this? Is this job too big for me? Am I in over my head? Are these even the right people? Is this even the right, team? Are these the right seats? Are the right people in the right room, in the right seats? And all these questions and self-doubt and everything else. And I'm telling you, I would not have gotten through that without those relationships, the Davids and the Scotts, and without the right tools that other people had handed me to say, hey, this might help you in your role. And so that's really why I started Communicate to Care. It's really why this podcast is a part of Communicate to Care, is I have a heart for those leaders that are like younger Justin, who have all the drive and they have all the potential in the world. And man, they're just overwhelmed. And they could be overwhelmed for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because, their dreams are so big. And sometimes it's just because they don't have the bandwidth to fix everything. And sometimes it's just because they're experiencing natural growing pains, but man, they don't know they're natural. It just feels painful. And sometimes it's they don't have the right tools, and sometimes it's they don't have the right relationship. Someone hadn't, come along to help them and coach them and invest in them and mentor them. And so, Communicate to Care was started for that, because the more people I meet, the more young Justins there are everywhere. They're in business, they're in the military, they're in churches, they're in education. They are everywhere. And if I didn't have the benefit of the right relationships and the right tools at the right time, I don't know where I would be. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this. And so now the Justin of today, who is so blessed to still be pastoring a church here in the Houston area, to still be serving as an Army chaplain with the reserves, 14 years in, God's blessed me so much with serving with great leaders. Spent the last few years within the special operations community, and it's just been so wonderful. I get to serve as a leadership and communications professor at a couple of Christian universities, at Toccoa Falls College and Abilene Christian University. I'm currently, at the time of this recording, it's just such a wonderful thing that God has given me. As a surprise, is Abilene Christian University, the school I work at, one of the schools I teach at, has a partnership with the Texas Rangers, who are now just about to start in the ALCS against the Astros, which puts me in a pickle and down in Houston with all my Astros loving congregation. But they've asked me to kind of put together some leadership development classes for the Rangers organization, which is just awesome. It's just such a cool opportunity that I get to do that. I've worked with some amazing Chick-fil-A operators and general managers, and, God just is bringing all these incredible people in there, and I get to see the fruit of the right relationships and the right tools get put to work. And so that's where my heart is, that my heart is for these, these leaders who, man, they've got it. They really have. They just don't have everything that they need to kind of scale these, intermittent hurdles that they face that are inevitable as you lead. So that's me in a nutshell. That's this podcast episode. And if you go to our website, it's communicatetoCare.com, www.communicatetoCare.com. You can see the different services and products that we've got that come from that heart to help those kind of leaders. There's the Jumpstart Your Communication that I mentioned, and that's really a great starting point for people who are interested, and who could benefit from that. So go check that out. If you are on the website already, if you're watching this video on the website, then you're already there. If you're listening to this through the podcast or watching it on YouTube, there'll be links in the description that get you there to the website and to these different products. And I'd love to talk to you. So there's links there to, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's book a call and let me talk to you and see how I can help you and get to know you a little bit. So that's me. That's who I am in a nutshell. And I'm just overjoyed to be doing what I do. God's been too good to me, and I'm just more than happy to steward that goodness and his wonderful graces out as far and as wide and as deep as he'll allow me. So I'd love to talk to you. So hit the website, communicatetoCare.com, and let's have a conversation.